Wellness Rhythm Show. Find your rhythm. Live your wellness.
Y'all, here's a question I want you to sit with for a second. When was the last time you were genuinely outside in the morning? Not rushing to your car, not squinting at your phone on a doorstep, but actually standing in daylight for a few intentional minutes.
Right, and here is why that question matters more than it sounds. A 2022 study published in Nature Communications tracked over 400,000 people and found that daytime light exposure was one of the strongest predictors of sleep quality, mood stability, and even metabolic health, stronger in some cases than diet or exercise.
That stopped me cold when I read it, because we spend so much time talking about what we eat and how we move, and almost zero time talking about light.
Exactly. And today we are going to fix that. Light is not just about visibility, it is a biological signal. And once you understand what it is actually doing inside your body, you will never think about sunlight the same way again.
So let's start at the beginning, because I want to make sure we are all on the same page. When we say light exposure shapes your biology, what does that actually mean in plain language?
Right, so here is the core concept. Your body runs on something called a circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour internal clock. And that clock is calibrated almost entirely by light, specifically by a tiny structure in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN.
The suprachiasmatic nucleus. I love that we are throwing that out there in the first 2 minutes.
Ha! Fair point. Think of it as the body's master timekeeper, and it is almost entirely dependent on light signals coming through your eyes to know what time it is.
So without proper light cues, the clock just drifts?
Precisely. And when it drifts, everything downstream gets disrupted. Your sleep, your cortisol rhythm, your hunger hormones, your mood regulation, the whole orchestra falls out of sync.
Here's the thing, though. I think most people picture light exposure and immediately think sunscreen and skin cancer risk. They do not think about it as a wellness input.
Which is a genuinely unfortunate framing, because the research here is substantial. Dr. Sachin Panda at the Salk Institute has spent years studying circadian biology, and his work makes a very compelling case that when you get light, not just whether you do, is as important as almost any other health behavior.
Okay, so talk to me about morning light specifically, because I know that keeps coming up in this space.
Right, so here is what happens. In the first hour or two after sunrise, the sun emits a particular quality of light, high in blue wavelengths, lower in intensity than midday. And that specific spectrum triggers a cascade in your brain.
What kind of cascade?
Cortisol gets a healthy morning pulse, which sounds alarming but is actually what you want. It is your natural alerting signal. Simultaneously, melatonin production winds down properly, and crucially, your body sets a timer for when melatonin will rise again that evening, roughly 14 to 16 hours later.
So morning light is literally setting your bedtime.
In a very real biological sense, yes. And here's the kicker. It needs to happen through actual daylight, not indoor lighting. Researcher Andrew Huberman at Stanford has been particularly clear on this point. Indoor lighting is typically around 200 to 500 lux. Outdoor morning light, even on an overcast day, is 10,000 lux or more.
That is a significant difference.
An order of magnitude, yes. Your eyes cannot substitute one for the other, no matter how many lamps you have.
Okay, so I have to be honest here. I started opening my blinds first thing in the morning a few months ago, and I noticed something shifted pretty quickly, but I genuinely could not tell you if it was placebo or real.
Brilliant point to raise. And I would push back gently. The research suggests it is likely both. There is a real physiological mechanism, but the behavioral signal of intentionality also matters. Doing something deliberate for yourself in the morning has its own psychological weight.
I will take it either way, honestly.
As you should. And before we go further, if you are finding this useful, please do hit like and subscribe wherever you listen. It genuinely helps us reach more people who could use this kind of information.
Yes, we appreciate every single one of you who does that. It really does matter. Okay, so let's talk about mood, because that is the piece I feel most in my own body. I notice I am just harder to knock over emotionally on days I get outside.
And that has a clear biological basis. Sunlight exposure increases serotonin synthesis in the brain. This is well established. A 2002 study by Young and colleagues in The Lancet showed that serotonin turnover rates in the brain are directly correlated with the amount of bright light exposure on any given day. Not mood as a vague concept, actual serotonin production.
So this is the same neurotransmitter that most antidepressants are trying to influence.
Correct. Which is not to say sunlight replaces clinical treatment. It absolutely does not. And we want to be clear about that. But it is a meaningful, accessible lever for mood regulation in the general population.
Here's the thing, though. I want to push back slightly on the accessibility piece, because not everyone can just pop outside for 20 minutes in the morning. We have people listening who are working overnight shifts, who live somewhere dark half the year, who have mobility limitations.
That is a genuinely fair challenge, and the research does offer some help here. Light therapy lamps, specifically those rated at 10,000 lux, have decades of evidence behind them, particularly for seasonal affective disorder. The Mayo Clinic and multiple psychiatric bodies recommend them. They are not equivalent to outdoor light, but they are meaningfully effective.
So there is an alternative for people who cannot get outside.
A partial but real one, yes, and it matters that we say that.
Let's talk about metabolism, because that one surprised me when I first encountered it. I did not expect sunlight to show up in that conversation.
Right, so this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Your metabolic processes, insulin sensitivity, glucose regulation, even fat storage, are governed in part by your circadian clock. And that clock, as we established, runs on light.
So if the clock is disrupted,
metabolic function gets disrupted too. There is substantial research linking circadian misalignment, which can be caused by insufficient daytime light as well as nighttime light exposure, to increased insulin resistance and higher rates of metabolic dysfunction. Studies from teams at Harvard's Brigham and Women's Hospital have been particularly compelling on this.
that is not a small thing. That connects light exposure to some of the biggest chronic health concerns our audience is navigating.
It does, and it reframes light from a comfort issue into a genuine metabolic input, which I think changes the urgency of the conversation.
Now here's where I want to get practical, because we can talk about the science all day, but our listeners are busy. What does a realistic light exposure habit actually look like?
The evidence points toward 10 to 30 minutes of outdoor light exposure within the first hour of waking as the high-value target. Eyes open, not staring at the sun to be clear, just outside in the ambient light.
And you do not need to carve out special time for it necessarily. This can be the school run, a walk to a coffee shop, standing in the garden with your tea.
Precisely. The behavior does not need to be heroic, it needs to be consistent. Even walking to your car more slowly and looking up rather than at your phone would register meaningful improvement for many people.
I actually started combining it with my water before coffee habit, which we talked about in an earlier episode. I open the blinds, drink my water, and if I can, I step outside for a few minutes before anything else starts. It is probably 5 minutes total.
5 minutes of outdoor morning light still delivers meaningful signal. It is not the same as 30 minutes, but it is categorically different from 0.
And then the evening side of this matters too, right? Because we talked about nighttime light affecting sleep in our sleep episode, but it connects here.
It does, and it is the inverse problem. Blue spectrum light in the evening, phones, laptops, LED overhead lighting, suppresses melatonin at exactly the point your body needs to be ramping it up. The circadian system is being told it is still morning at 10 p.m.
Which explains a lot of nights where I felt tired but could not actually fall asleep.
Structurally, yes. The practical mitigation is shifting to warmer toned lighting in the 2 hours before bed and reducing screen brightness. Not perfection, just directional change.
I switched my bedside lamp to a warm bulb a while back, and I genuinely think it changed the texture of my evenings. It just feels different.
The physics supports that instinct. Warm-toned bulbs emit far less blue wavelength light. Your melatonin pathway thanks you, even if it cannot say so.
I like that. Okay, so let me also name the skeptic in the room, because I know some listeners are thinking, this sounds nice, but is it really going to move the needle?
Right, and the honest answer is, it depends on your baseline. If you're already getting abundant outdoor time, the marginal gain is smaller. But research suggests most adults in modern environments are significantly light deprived during the day and significantly light overexposed at night. For those people, the gap is real.
And filling that gap costs nothing but a change in habit.
Which is rare in wellness. Most interventions come with either a price tag or a significant time commitment. This one is genuinely low barrier.
Y'all, if there is one thing I want you to walk away with today, literally walk away with, preferably outside, it is this. Get 10 to 30 minutes of outdoor light within that first hour of waking, not through a window. Outside, even if it is cloudy, even if it is 5 minutes, start there.
And for those who genuinely cannot get outside, investigate a 10,000 lux light therapy lamp. The evidence base is solid, the cost is relatively modest, and the behavioral habit is simple to build. Do not let perfect be the enemy of considerably better.
Light is not a luxury. It is a biological input your body is actively waiting for every single morning. And the remarkable thing is, it has always been free.
We have just rather inconveniently decided to spend most of our mornings indoors staring at smaller, dimmer rectangles.
Fair. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. If this episode was useful, share it with someone who could use it. And please do hit like and subscribe if you have not already. It helps more than you know.
Until next time, go outside, briefly and without sunglasses, ideally.
This show is part of the VoxCrea.ai system. If you want a show like this for your organization without building it yourself,
Go to voxcrea.ai and request a sample episode.